The moment Jake looked me in the eyes and told me it was over, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the sheer absurdity hit me with a force I hadn't anticipated. 7 years. 7 exhausting, relentless years of pouring every ounce of myself into him, believing in his dreams more fiercely than he ever did himself. And now here he stood, bold enough to tell me, straight to my face, that I wasn't supportive enough. "Anna," he said quietly, as if softness could lessen the blow, "you've never really understood my vision. You never showed the emotional support I needed." I felt something sharp twist in my chest, a bitter laugh escaping my throat again, colder this time. Emotional support? This, coming from the man whose dreams shifted faster than my morning coffee cooled? YouTube fame yesterday, crypto millionaire today, bubble tea tycoon tomorrow. I'd financed every fleeting obsession, every failed startup, every wild gamble. And through all the chaos, he had the audacity to claim I wasn't there? He shifted uneasily, eyes briefly flickering toward the door, and in that split second, I knew there was someone else. That suspicion became reality barely 24 hours later, as Chloe stepped into my living room, a whirlwind of perfume and artificial smiles. Jake introduced her casually, as though he'd known her forever, confidently placing a hand on the small of her back, his eyes daring me to say something. I stood frozen, my heart pounding loudly enough that I was certain they could hear it. Chloe's eyes quickly scanned the room, her smile slipping for just a fraction of a second when she saw the family photos, the memories I'd carefully framed, lining the shelves. She glanced quickly at Jake, uncertainty flickering across her polished expression, but Jake just smiled reassuringly. "Feel free to look around," he told her, leaning casually against the wall. "You'll be spending plenty of time here." Anger surged through me, white hot, threatening to explode. But beneath it was something more unsettling, something I didn't want to acknowledge. Shame. Shame for allowing myself to become invisible in my own life. As Chloe strolled through my house, marveling at the decor I'd carefully curated over years, Jake watched her with pride, oblivious or indifferent to my pain. It was that exact moment, watching another woman imagine herself in the home my grandparents left me, that finally snapped me awake. I felt clarity descend over me, sharp and certain. No more excuses, no more sacrifices. This was my home, my life, and for once I would fight for it. Jake had no idea what storm he'd just unleashed. And truthfully, neither did I. If you'd asked me 7 years ago what love meant, I would have described it as sacrifice. Unconditional, selfless, limitless sacrifice. I was 22, wide-eyed and hopeful, convinced I'd found something extraordinary when Jake walked into my life with his easy grin and boundless energy. Back then, Jake was magnetic, full of charm and ambition. His eyes lit up like fireworks whenever he talked about his dreams. And God, did he have dreams. First, there was his YouTube phase. I still remember him pacing around our tiny living room at 2 in the morning, passionately explaining how he'd cracked the algorithm, his eyes glazed over with excitement. I listened patiently, coffee mug clasped tightly, nodding as he described his plans for global domination. 6 months and thousands of dollars in camera equipment later, the only thing Jake had cracked was the screen of my brand new laptop after losing a game of Fortnite. Then came crypto, his so-called path to financial freedom. He'd whisper late-night promises into my ear. "Just one more investment, Anna, and we'll be free." I'd nod and smile, biting my tongue as our savings evaporated into thin air, leaving only empty promises and overdue bills. I worked overtime shifts, pulling myself out of bed each morning, feeling exhaustion carve deeper lines under my eyes. But each time Jake appeared with another opportunity, I'd swallow my fears and silently hand him whatever he needed, hoping this time would finally be different. Yet somehow, the crypto nightmare was just a warm-up. Jake's entrepreneurial spirit led us straight into a handmade bubble tea startup. I spent countless evenings after work packing tea leaves, labeling cups, and quietly enduring his tantrums whenever a batch didn't taste Instagram-worthy. And the day we shut down the tiny shop, I sat alone, silently packing up boxes, feeling the weight of every dollar lost and every sleepless night I'd spent convincing myself it was all worth it. Jake wasn't there. He was already on to his next big idea. Over the years, I'd gotten used to pretending I wasn't drained by his chaos, pretending his enthusiasm wasn't costing me my sanity. I smiled at friends, reassured family members who quietly questioned my decisions, telling everyone, including myself, that things would turn around. He just needs someone to believe in him, I'd repeat like a mantra until the lie felt true. But as the years passed, my reflection in the mirror grew unrecognizable. My eyes lost their spark, my smile forced and uncertain. Friends drifted away, tired of watching me self-destruct. Even Sarah, my best friend and a therapist by profession, started gently nudging me toward reality checks I refused to hear. Anna, how long will you keep pouring yourself empty for someone who never refills you? She'd asked softly one rainy afternoon, concern etched deep in her eyes. I brushed her off then, unable to face the truth, unable to admit the slow erosion of my self-worth. It was easier to keep giving than to accept I'd wasted my time, my energy, my life on someone incapable of loving anyone but himself. Until the day Jake introduced Chloe to my home as if I was the one intruding, I'd never fully grasped how far I'd fallen. Now, standing here watching Chloe touch the furniture I'd painstakingly chosen, the reality crashed into me with brutal clarity. I had been nothing more than a stepping stone in Jake's endless quest for validation, but no longer. This time I would finally fight, not for him, not for us, but for me. The turning point didn't happen with a grand gesture or dramatic confrontation. Instead, it arrived quietly, yet devastatingly, on a crisp Saturday morning, a morning that began like any other. Sunlight filtered gently through the blinds, casting a warm glow onto my grandmother's antique coffee table. I sat silently on the sofa, gripping a mug of steaming tea, breathing slowly, my heart aching with a quiet intensity. Upstairs, I could hear Chloe laughing softly, her voice intertwined intimately with Jake's whispers. They spoke as if I wasn't even there, as if this house was already theirs, every sound chipping away at the last fragments of my patience. Just then, Jake sauntered downstairs, his eyes barely acknowledging my existence. He opened the fridge, casually pouring milk into his coffee, then turned toward me with an unsettling calmness. "Anna," he began, leaning against the counter with a dismissive air, "Chloe was thinking of redecorating the guest room. I think the decor is getting outdated." The audacity left me momentarily speechless. My grandparents' bedroom, the room where my grandmother used to braid my hair and my grandfather read bedtime stories, casually dismissed as Jake's next pet project. "I thought you could move your stuff out this weekend," Jake added, looking straight at me without even blinking. Something within me ignited. All the years of quiet acceptance, all the moments I'd swallowed my anger and disappointment erupted into a searing, unstoppable fire. My heart pounded furiously, a wave of adrenaline surging through my veins. Instead of arguing, I simply nodded, forcing a calmness I didn't feel. "You're right," I replied, voice surprisingly steady. "It's time things changed around here." He smirked, entirely missing the threat beneath my words. "Glad you finally get it, Anna." As he walked away, his smug confidence burning into my memory, I picked up my phone, fingers trembling with determination. It took everything in me not to scream, cry, or break something right then. Instead, I dialed Sarah's number. "Sarah," I whispered urgently when she answered, my heart pounding with newfound resolve. "I'm done hiding. I need your help." 20 minutes later, we met again at the coffee shop. The cozy atmosphere suddenly felt charged, electric. Sarah leaned in, eyes filled with cautious optimism. "Anna," she said softly, placing a reassuring hand over mine. "I was waiting for this moment. You're finally choosing yourself." I nodded, feeling tears well up, not from pain but from relief. It was the first decision I had made solely for myself in years. "Tell me exactly what to do next," I said firmly. Sarah smiled knowingly. "It's simple. You remind him, and everyone else, exactly whose house this is. No more compromise, no more negotiations." Her words washed over me, fortifying my resolve. That afternoon, I quietly called a locksmith. Within the hour, shiny new keys rested comfortably in my palm, symbols of regained control. I sat quietly on my front porch, sipping tea, and watched the sun begin to set. Each minute brought Jake closer to the harsh realization that he'd underestimated me for the very last time. This house was mine. My life was mine. And from now on, no one, especially not Jake, would ever take that from me again. I sat across from Sarah at our usual coffee shop, my hands trembling slightly as I held onto my latte, steam curling softly above the porcelain cup. Around us, life continued quietly, the faint clinking of cups, muffled laughter from the corner table. But within me, everything felt unsettled, chaotic. Sarah waited patiently, eyes calm yet piercing, studying me as I fumbled to find the words. Finally, I exhaled heavily, allowing the truth to spill out. I can't believe how blind I've been, Sarah. 7 years. I watched him chase every ridiculous fantasy, never once questioning my role. Every late night crisis, every penny wasted, I justified it all, believing it was love. My voice cracked slightly. But now, I don't even recognize myself anymore. Sarah leaned forward slightly, concern mingling with intensity in her dark eyes. Anna, you've spent years defining your worth through Jake's approval, but now you see him clearly. That's your power. Her words landed heavily, piercing through layers of denial I didn't realize I still carried. Memories flooded back vividly. Evenings spent alone on the couch, anxiously refreshing our bank account after yet another failed business investment. The haunting silence in our house whenever Jake spiraled after a setback. A vivid flashback struck me, Jake pacing the kitchen, red-faced and shouting after his crypto investment tanked. I remembered the way he hurled the phone across the room, smashing it against the wall, then collapsing dramatically onto the floor, sobbing loudly until I comforted him. And I always comforted him, no matter how badly his mistakes stung me. Anna, Sarah gently broke into my thoughts. It's time you stop blaming yourself. You weren't responsible for his dreams, his failures, or his happiness. But I enabled it, Sarah, I whispered harshly, my eyes filling with frustrated tears. Every time he asked, I gave. Every time he broke, I fixed it. I taught him how to use me. Sarah shook her head, firm but kind. You loved him. You believed in his potential. That's human, Anna. But now it's time you started believing in yourself instead. I nodded slowly, feeling the ache in my chest soften into resolve. Sarah was right. If I didn't take control now, I'd forever remain trapped. That afternoon, I returned home, determined. I quietly watched from the hallway as Jake lazily lounged on the sofa, flipping through Netflix as if nothing had happened. His casual arrogance reignited my anger, fueling a quiet strength within me. Pulling out my phone, I dialed a locksmith. Each digit pressed was a small victory, the simple act of reclaiming my life. Within the hour, a man arrived, efficiently changing the locks. Jake barely glanced up from his phone, unaware his world was about to collapse. When Jake finally noticed me standing near the doorway, keys in hand, confusion spread across his face. "What's going on, Anna?" he asked sharply, standing quickly. "Did you change the locks?" "Yes," I replied calmly, despite my heart pounding in my chest. "It's my house. You've made your choice clear, so I'm making mine. You need to leave." He laughed nervously, eyes darting as he tried to regain control. "Come on, Anna, let's talk about this rationally. There's nothing left to discuss." My voice came out colder than I'd ever heard myself speak. "You have 1 hour." The disbelief in his eyes turned quickly to panic. Behind him, Chloe quietly emerged from upstairs, a suitcase already packed. Her eyes met mine briefly, a flicker of something resembling respect, or perhaps pity, crossed her expression as she moved swiftly toward the door. "Chloe?" Jake called out desperately, turning back toward her. She paused, hand already gripping the doorknob. "I'm sorry, Jake. You promised me a life you clearly can't provide." And just like that, she was gone, leaving Jake stunned and utterly exposed. I stood motionless, gripping my keys tightly, watching Jake crumble before me, stripped bare of arrogance and pretense. For a moment, I almost pitied him, until his next words reminded me exactly why I shouldn't. "You won't get away with this," he hissed, voice shaking. "You'll regret treating me like this." "No," I responded firmly, finally feeling empowered. "The only regret I have is not doing this sooner." Jake stormed past me toward his car, defeat radiating from every tense muscle in his body. The door slammed loudly behind him, leaving silence echoing in my ears. Standing alone in the house that was now entirely mine, clarity washed over me. The relief was profound, yet heavy, because I knew this fight was far from over. A few days passed, deceptively calm as I tried to reclaim my life, room by room, breath by breath, but peace proved fleeting. It started subtly, a lingering glance at work, whispers trailing off abruptly when I entered the break room, conversations dissolving as I approached. My colleagues, once friendly, now wore expressions of cautious discomfort, as if my mere presence had become a source of scandal. Anxiety crept steadily into my mind, gnawing at the edges of my newfound confidence. One afternoon, I overheard snippets from coworkers whispering in the break room. "Did you hear about Anna? Jake said she used him for money. Totally manipulative." My heart froze, blood turning to ice in my veins. Manipulative? Me? Anger surged through my body, but beneath it lurked fear, a sickening dread. I quickly left the office, clutching my phone with white-knuckled fingers, desperate to understand how these lies were spreading so quickly. It didn't take long to find the source. Scrolling through Instagram, I stumbled across a series of viral posts, sharp, vicious words crafted to destroy me. Photos carefully selected to paint Jake as the devoted partner, myself as a cold, controlling predator. Each post was liked and shared by hundreds, comments filled with sympathy for Jake, condemnation for me. And the account behind it all belonged to someone I'd never suspected, Mia, Jake's sister. My breath caught painfully in my throat, chest tightening as confusion and betrayal burned deep. Mia, the woman I'd once called family, had orchestrated this entire smear campaign against me. Fury surged, hot and bitter. With trembling fingers, I dialed Sarah. Her voice was calm, grounded. "Breathe, Anna. They're attacking because you've taken control. Don't lose sight of that." "I thought Mia and I were close," I whispered, feeling foolish, betrayed. "Why would she do this to me?" "You're a mirror, Anna," Sarah explained gently. "Your strength reflects everything she lacks. She's protecting Jake because admitting he's wrong means confronting her own flaws, too." Sarah's words steadied me, but I couldn't shake the betrayal stabbing deep within my chest. Determined, I decided it was time to confront Mia face to face. We met at a quiet cafe later that evening. Mia sat rigidly, eyes cold, hostility radiating from her posture. "What did I ever do to you, Mia?" I asked, my voice strained but firm. She leaned forward slightly, voice dripping venom. "You humiliated my brother. You made him believe he was worthless. You treated him like a child, and now you're pretending to be a victim?" I felt anger flare hotly inside me. "I supported Jake through everything, every failed dream, every reckless decision. You saw how I struggled," she laughed bitterly. "Support? You call that support? Every time you saved Jake, you made him weaker, more dependent on you. You controlled him, Anna, and you enjoyed it." Her words stung, the accusation cutting deeper than I anticipated. Had my sacrifices truly made Jake weaker? For a moment, self-doubt crept in again, but something inside me refused to accept this twisted narrative. "No, Mia. Jake's failures are his alone," I said steadily, regaining strength. "I gave him everything because I genuinely loved him, but that ends now. I'm done apologizing for your family's dysfunction." Mia's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You'll regret crossing us, Anna." I stood slowly, gathering my dignity and my purse. The only regret I have is not doing it sooner. As I turned to leave, Mia's phone rang abruptly. Her face shifted rapidly from irritation to shock. Unable to resist curiosity, I paused, watching as color drained from her face. "What do you mean Chloe posted a video?" she hissed, panic clear in her voice. Without a word, I pulled out my own phone, scrolling frantically. Chloe had released a video, a tearful confession detailing exactly how Jake had manipulated her, lied about the house, and deceived everyone, including Mia herself. In an instant, Jake's carefully crafted narrative unraveled publicly, right in Mia's grasp. For the first time in days, I felt a smile forming, relief washing over me. But even as I walked away victorious, I knew the battle wasn't over yet. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a message from an unfamiliar number. The screen lit up ominously. "We need to talk urgently. I have something important to tell you. Meet me at Cafe Sunrise at noon tomorrow. Please, Anna. It's Laura." My pulse quickened immediately. Laura, Jake's mother? We'd barely exchanged more than polite small talk over holidays. Her sudden appearance made me uneasy, curiosity tangled with apprehension. At precisely noon, I entered the quiet cafe. Laura was already seated, her delicate hands nervously clutching a steaming cup of coffee. She looked smaller than I remembered, her usually composed posture tense, vulnerable. As I approached, she met my gaze, eyes filled with something I hadn't anticipated, deep shame. "Anna," Laura began softly, eyes shimmering with unshed tears, voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry." "Sorry?" I asked cautiously, sitting down across from her, my body rigid with uncertainty. "Sorry for what exactly?" She drew a shaky breath, visibly struggling to maintain composure. "For everything Jake has done, for everything Mia's doing now, but mostly for letting it get this far." Her eyes, now glistening with tears, revealed profound pain I'd never noticed before. She leaned closer, voice trembling. "Anna, you must understand something important about Jake, about our family." She hesitated briefly as if gathering courage. Their father and I, we placed impossible expectations on Jake and Mia. From childhood, we pushed them relentlessly. They had to be exceptional. Failure was unacceptable. Her voice cracked, eyes shimmering with regret. We thought pressure would build strength. Instead, it created something toxic. Mia became bitter, jealous. Jake became dependent, entitled. We never set boundaries, and so neither could they. And now, they've hurt you deeply. I stared at Laura, stunned. Pieces of the puzzle suddenly clicked into place, shifting my understanding of Jake's endless search for validation, his desperation masked behind arrogance, his constant need for reassurance, approval, and support. Laura's eyes held mine, pleading for forgiveness she didn't expect. When Jake came to us recently, demanding money, claiming you'd stolen everything from him, for once we refused. He was shocked, furious, desperate. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, Anna, but necessary. She reached into her bag, pulling out an envelope. Inside were faded family photos. Young Jake and Mia smiling stiffly, carefully posed, perfectly dressed, eyes distant and unhappy. Each image carried the weight of invisible expectations pressing down upon them. Anna, Laura whispered, pushing the photographs toward me. Please understand, I'm not excusing their actions, but maybe this helps you see it was never your fault. They were broken long before you entered our lives. Her words pierced deeply. I saw Jake clearly now, not as a monster, but as a deeply wounded man, desperately filling emptiness with dreams he couldn't sustain. My heart twisted painfully, compassion mixing with resolve. Yet even as understanding filled me, my determination only strengthened. I finally knew what needed to be done. Laura, I said firmly, meeting her gaze, thank you for telling me this. But you're right, it doesn't excuse Jake's actions or Mia's cruelty. She nodded softly, resignation in her eyes. I understand. I paused, choosing my next words carefully. I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or going backward. Laura nodded slowly, eyes filling with relief and sadness intertwined. I would never ask you to. We sat quietly for a moment, silence heavy yet comforting. For the first time in months, clarity replaced confusion in my heart. Jake's story wasn't mine anymore. Neither was his family's legacy of hurt and dysfunction. As I stood to leave, Laura's hand gently caught mine. Anna, she whispered urgently, her voice stronger now, determined. No matter what happens next, please never lose sight of your strength again. I squeezed her hand gently, finally feeling free. I won't. Walking out of that cafe, I understood with absolute clarity. This wasn't just a fight for my house or my reputation. It was a battle for my life, and I intended to win. The day after meeting Laura, my phone buzzed relentlessly, flooded with supportive messages, encouragement, and even apologies from people who had believed Mia's vicious lies. Chloe's revelations had shattered Jake's web of deceit, leaving him exposed and desperate. Yet amid relief, a quiet dread lingered. A storm wasn't calmed so easily. Late that evening, just as I began to unwind, my phone buzzed sharply, vibrating insistently. Mia's name flashed aggressively across the screen. My stomach tightened, anxiety quickly replaced by a fiery defiance. Taking a deep breath, I answered. What do you want, Mia? I asked firmly, my voice edged with caution. Anna, please. Mia's voice trembled, fragile and strangely vulnerable. I need your help. After everything you've done, I shot back, disbelief coating my voice. He's gone, she whispered, a slight tremor betraying genuine fear. He left some weird message about how he'd make everyone pay, especially you. I thought it was just anger, but now I'm worried, really worried. A cold chill sliced down my spine. What did he say exactly? Her breath shook audibly through the line. That if he couldn't have the life he deserved, neither could you. Dread pooled in my chest, instinct overpowering skepticism. Mia might have hurt me deeply, but the fear in her voice was undeniable. Jake's impulsiveness had always worried me, but I'd never thought him dangerous until this moment. I raced upstairs, locking doors and windows, heart hammering relentlessly. Minutes felt like hours as anxiety suffocated the silence around me. Then, abruptly, headlights swept through my window, illuminating my bedroom in harsh, unsettling flashes. Jake's familiar car screeched into the driveway, engine roaring before shutting off abruptly, plunging everything back into darkness. Frozen, I gripped my phone, preparing to dial for help, when heavy pounding echoed against my front door. Jake shouted incoherently, his voice a furious blend of anger and desperation. "Anna, open this door! You won't take everything from me! I deserve better!" I stood frozen, breath shallow, heart racing painfully in my chest. Each bang against the door rattled through me, threatening my resolve. Memories of our happier days flashed painfully before my eyes, warring fiercely against reality. Yet amidst panic, Laura's words echoed clearly in my mind. "Never lose sight of your strength again." Taking a deep, steadying breath, I dialed emergency services, clearly describing the situation. Police sirens quickly filled the distance, approaching swiftly, their presence dissolving Jake's bravado into panicked silence. As police officers gently escorted Jake away, his gaze briefly met mine, eyes hollow, defeated. He no longer looked powerful, just broken and lost. Part of me ached for him, mourning the person I once believed he could become. But I couldn't rescue him anymore. When the police left, silence returned, heavy yet reassuring. Standing alone on my porch beneath the soft glow of streetlights, I felt an overwhelming clarity. I wasn't just fighting Jake or Mia or their family. I'd finally faced the truth of my past, the powerlessness I once embraced willingly. Now I held firmly onto a promise made to myself. I would never allow my boundaries to crumble again, not for Jake, not for anyone. Tonight had changed everything. I had survived the storm, but now it was finally my turn to decide how the next chapter of my life would begin. The weeks that followed felt surreal, as though I'd awakened from a long, painful dream. But reality kept nudging me awake. Texts, supportive messages, sympathetic smiles at work. Still, my mind lingered on Jake and Mia, a stubborn ache refusing to completely disappear. Then, one rainy evening, I heard a soft knock on my front door. Through the peephole, I saw Mia standing on the porch, shivering slightly in the rain. My heart tensed instinctively, caution warring with curiosity. Opening the door, I noticed her swollen, red-rimmed eyes. "Anna," she started hesitantly, her voice thick with guilt. "Can we talk?" I nodded slowly, stepping aside to let her in. She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable in the house she'd once tried to claim for her brother. She sank onto the couch cautiously, her hands trembling slightly. "I know nothing I say can change what I did," she began, voice breaking. "But I need you to know, I was wrong. I hurt you because I couldn't face how messed up our family is, and how much I was part of it." I sat silently, allowing her confession space to breathe. It felt strange, empowering even, to hear Mia finally acknowledge the truth I'd carried alone for so long. When Mom told me about meeting you, about our childhood pressures, and how she felt responsible, it shook something inside me. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I hurt you because it was easier than admitting Jake and I were broken. Easier to blame you than face the reality that we're both broken." For a moment, quiet filled the space between us. I saw genuine remorse etched on Mia's face. She seemed utterly stripped of defenses, exposed, raw. My anger softened slightly. Not into sympathy exactly, but something approaching understanding. "I can't undo what I did," she continued quietly. "But I'm sorry, Anna. Truly." I took a slow breath, carefully weighing my words. "Mia, you hurt me deeply. You tried to destroy my reputation, my life, and that's not easily forgiven." She nodded solemnly, eyes fixed downward. "But," I added softly, "I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace." Mia's eyes widened in genuine surprise, tears filling them again. "Thank you, Anna. I don't deserve your forgiveness." "Maybe not," I said quietly, firmly. "But you need it more than I do." She stood slowly, gathering her coat, the weight of our conversation heavy but healing. As Mia stepped toward the door, she paused, turning back one last time. "Jake, he wanted me to ask if you'd see him," she said hesitantly. "He's staying with our uncle, getting therapy finally. He seems lost." I felt my chest tighten briefly, heart beating faster, a familiar ache pulling sharply within. "I can't fix Jake, Mia. Neither can you. Only he can do that now." She nodded sadly, understanding filling the silence as the door gently closed behind her. A few days later, my phone vibrated with a message from an unfamiliar number. My heart froze at the name glowing brightly on the screen. Jake. "Anna, I'm sorry. For everything. I lost myself and you paid the price. I won't ask forgiveness, but I want you to know." I'm trying to rebuild my life. You showed me what strength looks like. Thank you. I stared at the screen, emotions swirling chaotically inside my chest. Pain, sadness, relief. Finally, my fingers moved instinctively, replying simply, Jake, it's time you learned to stand on your own. Good luck. I pressed send, exhaling deeply, finally letting go of the heavy burden I'd carried for years. My forgiveness wasn't given lightly, nor did it erase the scars he'd left. But it gave me freedom, the freedom to step forward into a life no longer defined by Jake's needs, failures, or dreams. Now, at last, I felt ready to build a life truly mine, one defined by strength, boundaries, and the quiet courage I'd fought so fiercely to reclaim. Months later, as spring painted fresh color over the world outside, I stood in a warmly lit community hall, heart pounding gently, palms slightly damp. Rows of chairs were filling quickly with faces both familiar and new, women, men, young adults, all here for the same reason, to listen to my story. Sarah stood by my side, her steady presence a quiet reassurance. She squeezed my hand gently. You ready, Anna? I drew a steadying breath, feeling a rush of nervousness mixed with excitement. Yes, I replied softly, surprised by my own certainty. More than ever. Stepping forward to the microphone, I faced a room full of strangers who would soon feel like friends. For a brief second, panic threatened to steal my voice. But then I remembered why I was here. I remembered the quiet, painful nights spent convincing myself my worth was measured in someone else's eyes, someone else's dreams. I smiled warmly, leaning into the microphone, letting authenticity flow into my voice. My name is Anna, and today I want to share with you the hardest lesson I ever learned, that sometimes, in loving someone deeply, we lose sight of ourselves. The room was silent, expectant. I continued carefully, each word a step toward healing, toward strength. I spent 7 years believing my value depended entirely on what I could give. I mistook sacrifice for love, compromise for connection, silence for peace, but eventually reality forced me awake. As I spoke, I saw nods of understanding ripple across the crowd, eyes glisten softly with recognition. It filled me with quiet courage. My ex-partner didn't respect me because I never showed him what respect looked like. He couldn't see my boundaries because I never drew them clearly. When I finally did, everything changed. I paused, catching Sarah's proud gaze briefly. But the most powerful lesson I learned wasn't about him, it was about me. True healing doesn't come from revenge or even from forgiveness. It comes from reclaiming your voice, your power, your worth. It comes from deciding you are enough, exactly as you are. When I finished speaking, applause filled the room warmly, sincerely. As the workshop ended, people lingered, eager to share their own stories of pain and hope. Each conversation deepened my resolve, reinforcing that this new chapter of my life held purpose far beyond my past pain. Later that evening, as I closed the door behind me, I felt peaceful. My phone lit up with messages of gratitude, encouragement, and shared vulnerability. One message stood out, Sarah's gentle reminder. You did it, Anna. You didn't just survive. You turned your pain into something beautiful. I smiled, feeling the truth of her words resonate deeply. Jake had once tried to convince me I was weak, dependent, incomplete without him. Now, standing firmly on my own 2 feet, I knew he was wrong. Turning toward the mirror in my hallway, I finally recognized the woman staring back at me. She was stronger, wiser, her eyes brighter, her smile genuine. Scars remained, but they no longer defined her. Instead, they told a story of resilience, courage, and unbreakable self-worth. This was the beginning, not just of a new life, but of the real me.